Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Harrison Tinsley Show. Today we're joined by John Paul, my friend from Berkeley. What's up, man?
Hey Harrison, thank you for having me on the show today.
You're most welcome, man. I'm stoked to have you here. Really glad to have been able to connect with you and become friends. And yeah, just thankful to know you.
Yeah, it's been an incredible time doing a lot with Turning Point USA at Berkeley, and just so much has happened in the past months and throughout the semesters. So very, very honored to be able to, have you visit campus and to connect with you.
Yeah, Turning Point's a great organization. I'm stoked to be able to hang out with you guys when I go there. And yeah, I appreciate it, man. So start off by telling us your story. How'd you grow up? How'd you become who you are? What was life like? When you were a kid, how'd you become conservative? Were you always conservative? How are you now the head of Turning Point at Berkeley, where there's a bunch of crazy liberals, and yet you're standing strong conservative there?
Right. So as you mentioned, right now I'm the current president of Turning Point USA, which is actually not really a path that I would have expected myself to go down, and even before college. What ended up happening is my entire life I was raised in a conservative household, and I did hear about politics, but politics didn't really become super big for me until about junior year of high school when I started investigating more different arguments and different politicians and different commentators. And that's when I started coming to my own beliefs and just exploring everything that I could possibly explore. And from that point, I would kind of just call myself a conservative. I was against the transgenderism stuff. I was pro-life. I was free market economist, and I continue to uphold those values, of course, as we'll probably discuss later on in the show. And I would say throughout high school, even and just have to mention real fast is that the liberalism doesn't even start in college. It actually starts in high school, particularly in the AP classes. In the area I'm from, it's very fundamentally conservative, and the fundamentals, the people who have been here for a long time, are largely conservative and Christian. But we recently had like an influx of people move into our city, and it's kind of put a balance to it. So now it goes about 50-50 and could swing either way. And that was definitely prevalent throughout high school when my peers, especially, were by and large liberal. And I remember even in my AP government class, the teacher had us do a political compass test and to see how many of the students were Democrat versus how many were Republican. And it literally came to about two people were Republican and everyone else was Democrat. This is in high school in a fairly conservative area
Wow.
in my
And
city,
where
and
where did you grow up?
Glendora, California.
Okay.
Yes. So that's kind of the climate I was in entering high school, but I still kind of held firm with my beliefs. I didn't really plan on getting into politics, but eventually in college, I was going there, and the people who I was friends with who were conservatives, or particularly the people who were friends with my parents, were telling them like, "Oh, you're sending your son to Berkeley, they're going to indoctrinate him, and he's going to become extremely liberal." And so I was just everyone just told me, just hold your political beliefs to yourself. Don't talk to anyone about politics. No one needs to know your politics. Just make sure you're very reserved. Make sure no one finds out you're conservative. Don't write it on your papers or anything. Um, and I was kind of silent my first year of college. But then, like you, I dated a liberal, and that kind of swung me very far to the
Thanks.
right. Um, luckily, my story didn't end as it wasn't as dangerous as yours, but that's just kind of like a little funny joke I like to throw in there. Uh,
That was great.
so all this politics stuff is relatively new to me. In about the beginning of my sophomore year is when I started to join the conservative clubs. I started joining like college Republicans. I started joining Turning Point USA, started joining the California Review, and those are like a few different conservative clubs we have here on campus. And eventually, just being involved more and more, I started doing really well. People were liking me and liking what I was saying. And then eventually, the thing that was really what pushed me forward into the movement was the day that you came on campus for the tabling event, which was because before that I was very nervous to, very nervous to table on campus. Even though I was involved in the conservative clubs, I was still kind of reserved about being open about my political beliefs. And then, and then the very thing I was worried about was the very thing that pushed me further into politics, being that, as you know, the viral clip that occurred where uh, a man pretending to be a woman came up with a whole carton of tomato juice and started pouring it all over our sign that said, "Kids can't change their gender, change my mind." And that was a completely insane experience because I didn't know that a scientific fact would be met with so much hostility on a university campus that is supposed to be known for exploring science. And then, of course, I had that famous one-liner, "Behold the tolerant left," and that went viral. And then the next day, I got a call from Fox News asking me to be on the show. And so I think, in a way, God like didn't allow me to not do this. He's like, "Okay, I'm gonna make you viral, and then you're gonna be on Fox News, and now everyone's gonna know you're conservative anyways. So why even hide it?" So then later in that semester. I got selected to be the next president of Turning Point USA, and I still currently am the president of Turning Point USA, and that has been going very well. I'm also now the editor in chief of the conservative newspaper, the California Review, and that's been going really well. So getting involved in politics has really been a blessing for me, and I really enjoy fighting for the things that I'm passionate about, which is the trans issue, which is the abortion issue, which is many of the other issues that we've seen come along with the new postmodern kind of neo-Marxist wave of woke ideology.
It's an incredible story, man. I'm really glad you got placed in that position. You said that line, it was hilarious, and that really projected you forward to see how you watch you grow. I mean, it's been awesome. I'm really stoked to hear that those are the, issues that matter to you, because to me those are the two greatest evils of our time. So I'm glad to hear that, and I'd love to hear, why it is that you're so passionate about those two and anything else you're passionate about, but definitely those two, because they're really confusing, the most basic beautiful truth that is, like, God created man and woman, boy and girl. There's nothing else. Everything else is basically a mental illness or some sort of confusion, and that's sad. I'm sorry that some people might really be confused, but the reality is when they start mutilating children and having guys take girls trophies, etc., change in front of them, it's just, no, we absolutely have to put our foot down and stop it.
Absolutely. And that's a big reason why I'm very passionate about these issues is that these are extraordinarily fundamental truths that are completely objective truths, and there's no way to debate around them. But society has tried to find a way, particularly the left, to undermine every single fundamental belief that we have, no matter how wrong they are, and just try to create arguments to support those beliefs. And it's just sickening what they're doing to kids. I think that's probably the biggest reason I'm passionate about it is because kids are perhaps one of the most pure members we have of society. They've done nothing wrong. They're completely innocent, and they're our future. We are just the left is just completely violating them in their policies and in their beliefs, and I think we are obligated to protect them. Any policy that ends in the death of an unborn human child is completely nonsensical and violent policy, all in the name of defending women or defending like some oppressed group, which is really like a Marxist viewpoint on the world, which is, and Karl Marx's theory of communism was that the poor working class would uprise and revolt against the rich people, and he kind of created this oppressed class versus oppressor class, and we see the left view everything through that same exact lens. Women are oppressed by their pregnancies, and the oppressor is the human child, I guess. And so we have to kill the human child. Except now, then they try to dehumanize the child, which is, of course, absolutely insane. And there's this acronym called SLED, which I think is very important for pro-lifers in the movement to know about. SLED stands for size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. These are the four tools that the left uses to essentially defend the pro-choice position, saying that oh the fetus is basically like this really tiny thing that you can barely see at the moment of conception. So why should we defend that? But of course you can't use size to discriminate against other people. Just because someone's a tiny human being doesn't mean they're not a human being. Um, the next one was a level of development. And of course, you can't use level of development to discriminate against people either. We have infants who aren't as rational or aware or self-aware as born people are and adults are, but we can't kill infants because of that reason. Just because someone is less developed than another person doesn't make that acceptable to use to discriminate against someone. Environment is another one they use. They say that just because the fetus is located inside of the uterus of a woman, that the woman now has full bodily rights to exterminate the fetus as if it's some sort of parasite. But just because someone can only survive in a certain environment doesn't make it okay for you to move them to another environment which they can't survive in. Like we can only survive on planet Earth doesn't mean Martians can come down and take us in a spaceship and send us to Mars. Then the last one, degree of dependency, right? Like they'll say like, oh, because the fetus is dependent on the mother means that it's okay to commit an abortion. And it's like, well, okay. Well, human infants dependent on the mother for food, for shelter, for survival, for everything. If I think if an infant has a right to life at all, then so should a fetus, because if at least if we're determining it based off of dependency, because infants are extremely dependent on someone else's compulsion to survive. So I think those are the four main ways that the left will try to um, defend their pro-choice position, and I don't think any of them are successful.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, we're obviously not going out hunting down anyone because they're a midget. You're obviously not, going out and hurting or killing anyone with developmental disabilities or, as far as infants or kids go, they really couldn't survive on their own for a very long time, but at least until they were 4 or 5 years old. I mean, they're basically completely dependent on their parents for food, shelter, etc. So, I mean, that would just be like justifying the killing of so many people. It's just those are horrible arguments, and I've yet to hear a very coherent one as to why people or women should be able to abort their children. It's just not one where the logic aligns. Like life begins at conception, human life is valuable, and it's really sad, man. Why do you think it's such a big thing that they're pushing so hard?
Because they want it. That's really the only thing is that people really want to have their abortions because they want just I have to put it crudely, and I apologize for this.
Yeah.
They want all of the sex and none of the responsibility. How about instead of sleeping around with everyone, you have responsible sex and maybe, maybe wait until marriage. That's probably a good idea. Um, but just more forth, I mean, it's really to protect elements of their lifestyle, and at that point, when people really want something, no matter how wrong it is, they will fight at lengths, great lengths to defend it. And I think we find that it's very convenient to be able to kill your child at will, as long as you're willing to dehumanize that child. And most of the left's arguments you can make towards born children, like there's this a trinity of sorts of problems that they like to bring up that I kind of have tried to synthesize, which is they'll say the mother is, in financial ruins, is in mental ruins, or is in physical ruins. And that, like, oh, the mother can't afford to raise a child, especially if the dad's not in the picture, or the pregnancy could be affecting her mental health very severely, especially if she's, just a college student, or if she's just trying to get through life. She can be struggling mentally. Now she has to worry about raising a kid. And then there is also the physical element where it's like, oh, well, she can feel sick throughout the pregnancy, and maybe it could not really, it could be doing a number on her physical strength. And they use that trifecta of arguments. But one thing that you can realize about those arguments is they all apply to a born human child. And so I can make those same exact things and apply it to a 2-year-old and say, well, isn't infanticide, a viable option then? Like killing 2-year-olds? It's like if you're both of your if you know if you're married and you and your partner lose your job, it's going to be difficult to raise a child. But if he's already 2 years old, you can't commit an abortion anymore. That would be infanticide. Should we then allow infanticide because of financial reasons or the mental health reasons? Oh man, I'm just completely sick of my child crying all the time, and it's just really putting a stress on my life. Maybe I should just slit his throat, you know? Or financial reasons. Oh no, sorry, I already brought up financial reasons, physical reasons. I don't know, maybe your son is like punching you too much and kind of gave you an ankle sprain at some point trying to carrying him. Maybe you should just I don't know, like smash his head into the wall. I hate to be violent and cruel, but you kind of have to be when you're
Yeah,
talking about abortion, is because you have these, especially like third trimester abortions, even second trimester abortions and first trimester abortions. In a first trimester abortion, the abortion pill like basically poisons the fetus and like expels it. And they try to use this word expel to make it sound nicer, but you're basically poisoning the fetus and crushing it. In the second trimester, you have to suck up the fetus and suck its brains out. And the third trimester, you have to basically crush his skull and decapitate his limbs. It's like, how does that not sound sickening? Like
it's
seriously.
definitely sickening.
And it's like, okay,
Eh,
my thing is, let's imagine a world in which abortion is not possible, right? Like there's no way you can commit an abortion. Like I feel like the left would be very strong advocates of infanticide in that case. It's like, I mean, I hope they wouldn't be, but most of their arguments would mean that it has to follow that infanticide is okay if you think they work. If you think that you can have an abortion just because you're going through financial stress, then you that would apply to any born human being that is caring for another human being. So in a world in which abortion doesn't exist, then would you be an advocate for infanticide? And if not, then you have to just under you can't hold that position anymore. It's this is what's called in philosophy a reductio ad absurdum, is that you're showing how a certain uh, a certain argument leads to absurd consequences, and in this case, most of their arguments lead to the absurd consequence of infanticide. And I don't think most people are willing to accept the killing of 2-year-olds. Maybe Peter Singer is, but other than that, most people aren't really willing to kill 2-year-olds.
yeah, I'm totally with you. I mean, the reality is most abortions are just basically out of convenience and used as birth control, which is tragic. Obviously, we have so many ways of practicing safe sex nowadays that that's just ridiculous. Definitely ideal to wait for marriage. But, people are going to do what they're going to do, but there's just so much opportunity to make sure that that doesn't happen. Then when that does happen, that means something. And it just seems to me like it all comes back kind of to fear. They have, women afraid, like, oh, am I gonna be a good parent? Am I gonna be able to afford this? My life's gonna change so much, and it's all this fear. And what I've noticed is this, having been through it myself, but even just observing others, where I'm skeptical of them or my own fears or insecurities before I was a dad. It's like every single time I've seen someone become a parent, you're just like, wow, they're a great dad. They're a great mom. It's like it innately comes out of them and you just make it happen. It's not some huge thing. It doesn't drag your life down. It's the most amazing thing ever being a dad. It just brings your life up in every single way, gives it more meaning, more purpose, more love, opens your heart to an amount of love you couldn't even imagine before, makes you more responsible, and it just makes everything better, not worse. It's like this idea that it holds you back or something, and it doesn't in any way. And they're playing on people's fear and emotions, and it's just really sad because having children's amazing.
Yes, definitely. And I think especially what you said about after the child is born, after they become parents, it's like there's this innate biological reaction that comes out of people to be good dads and mothers. And I really think that the biggest cure for a pro-choice woman from, uh, you know, converting from pro-choice to pro-life would be the ability to hold her child in her arms. And I mean, and we see this in studies where we know that, that women, that I think it's about like over 90% of women who were considering abortions but decided not to get one are glad they made the decision to not get an abortion. And we know that people become more pro-life once they start having kids. And you can try to say that a born kid is different from an unborn child, but the reality is right there, is that somehow people are becoming more pro-life once they become parents. And I don't think there's, as I mentioned, there's no way that you can properly discriminate against an unborn child. I think every reason that we would have to value a born human being, we would have to value an unborn human being. And so I really wish that we can somehow have the opportunity to allow people to see what their lives would be like once they have their child versus, like before they consider getting an abortion.
Yeah, I mean, even, when women and men, mainly women, see just the ultrasound, it increases their likelihood of not having an abortion dramatically. It's just, there's like this fake idea that it's just like some alien growing inside you. It's not a real human or something. And I don't know how they try to play by that. They obviously try to say like heartbeat or conception or if it could survive outside the mother's womb. But with science, that's just dropping and dropping anyway. So that doesn't, it's just not a valid argument. And the reality is once a baby's made at conception, it's a human life. It's a unique DNA worthy of protection that we're all granted by God or in the Declaration of Independence. It's just, I don't get it, man.
Right. I mean, I think for that, like the line of reasoning that I would pursue is that every reason that we would have to value a born human being or to say why it's wrong to kill a born human being must also apply to a fetus. And I think and this came up in my debate that I had recently with Destiny, um, which was that there's both intrinsic and extrinsic moral worth in a fetus. And these are the actual metrics in which we use to determine whether or not a born human being has value. So I think we know for a fact, scientific fact, it's completely undebatable that from the moment of conception is a living human being. That's not up for debate. You can search it up on or you used to be able to search it up on Google, but they say it's complex. But if you just go to all of the scientific textbooks, all the reputable scientific textbooks, articles, they will all tell you that life begins at conception. 98% of biologists polled and embryologists and scientists who were actually Democrats and actually pro-choice too, but by majority, agreed that life begins at conception. All of the reputable philosophers agree that life begins at conception. But I mean, you can even reason it out. Like if a fetus is growing. We know that a fetus begins cellular reproduction and begins growing from the moment of conception. So how can it be alive and grow is how can you be not alive and growing? Like if it's growing, it's obviously alive. And so we know that's the case. And the two arguments that I brought up against destiny was one from intrinsic value and extrinsic value. Intrinsic value being that from the moment of conception, being a human life means that you are now a member of a rational kind because humans are rational creatures. We would say that it's more wrong to kill a human being than it is to kill like a pig or a chicken. And the only way we can really discern this distinction in between the two is based off our degree of rationality. Pigs aren't rational creatures. They don't have an understanding of right and wrong. Human beings have a moral sense. We are very logical. We can use logic, whereas most animals they can't really deduce things logically. We can use math, which is also another form of logic. We have a sort of like fascination and appreciation of aesthetics. Like we can find things beautiful, but um, I've never really seen like a chicken like look out into the trees and just be like completely astonished by the nature. And so, I mean, all of these things point to us being rational creatures and to being, having a soul furthermore. But I don't even think we need to argue like on the basis of a soul. I think just on the basis of being a rational creature shows that we have intrinsic moral value. And I'd say that most people are willing to accept that. You only start not accepting that once you engage in the pro-choice line of rhetoric. So that was the intrinsic argument that I came up with is being a member of a rational kind, which means you have a rational capacity. There's something Destiny said about the rational capacity thing that I'll probably bring up later when I review the debate more thoroughly. But The other one that I brought up was from extrinsic moral value, which was like, okay, we need a proper theory for the wrongness of killing. And so when we see an adult human being be killed, ignore the fetus for now. If we see the adult human being be killed, how would we say that this is wrong? Like, what would our thought process and reasoning be behind the wrongness of this? I mean, obviously, one is that he's intrinsically morally valuable, but regardless from the intrinsic value, we know that killing a man, harms him in some way. Hoping that we can accept that. And so we know that we have to investigate the nature of this harm, right? Because it's not enough to just say it's a harm. Many things are harms, but what is the nature of this harm? What are you depriving this person of? And the thing that you're depriving this person of is their humanly future, is the experiences that they would have had you not killed them and ended their life prematurely. And this works very well with human intuition. You know, I mean personally, I know that I don't want to die because if I do, that'll be, I won't be able to experience the wonders of life that I have ahead of me that I want to experience. We have statements, sayings that are kind of like, I'm too young to die, which kind of like implies that like a premature aspect of it. Statements like I have my whole life ahead of me that are often used very much. And so this works very well with human intuition. And I think most people would be willing to accept that, yeah, I don't want to lose the entirety of my future. So for that reason, I think dying would be like a great wrong to me is because I would lose my future. Um, and so when you kill someone, you're forcibly removing and robbing their future from them. And yet we can apply that same line of reasoning to a human fetus from the moment of conception. You can't do it before conception. Some people will try to say that that would apply to a sperm cell. It does not. Once the sperm meets the egg, then there is a creature of a rational kind who has a rational capacity, who has a humanly future, and you cannot deprive that person of their
Unique
of the
DNA.
consciousness. That's right. You cannot deprive that person of the consciousness that they will have, of the experiences that they will have, and you can't deprive the person of, their humanly future. That's essentially the argument, is that these two cases in which we would use to determine why a born human being is valuable and why it's wrong to kill a born human being necessarily applies to a fetus.
That's a really interesting way of thinking about it and logically explaining it out. I guess if I was the devil's advocate, I'd say, well, what about the fact though that a woman has to, carry that baby for 9 months and perhaps she doesn't want to? Why should she not have her right to do what she wants with her body, John?
Right. So that would be like a bodily rights argument. And that one thing that's fascinating about bodily rights arguments, and specifically from philosophers like Judith Jarvis Thompson, is that they try to kind of um, go around this whole debate over whether or not the fetus is a person or not. And they kind of grant that a fetus is a person. And they say, okay, well, regardless, don't you think that, you know, like that a woman would have a right to not have her body used? Like, do you think that, like, because you do you think you could really compel someone to use her body to maintain pregnancy? Right. And the issue with bodily rights arguments is that bodily rights arguments are either rely on a premise that is too weak, meaning that they would not include things like a human fetus, or they are too strong, meaning that it would include way too much, and you can basically do anything to a person on the basis of having a bodily connection. And most cases, most arguments, bodily rights arguments, are disanalogous. And the issue is that you cannot use your bodily autonomy and extend that to violating another human being. So if someone's left their stuff on a bench, I can't like sit on it and like just stop them from taking their wallet back or anything else that's valuable. And they could come up to me and say, "Hey, you're sitting on my wallet. Can you, stand up and get my stuff? Otherwise, you're stealing my stuff." And you're like, "Nope, it's my bodily right to stand here and sit here right now, so I'm not going to get up." Or you can't use your bodily rights to be like, "Okay, I'm going to use my fist and punch this person." Oh, I'm just doing what I want with my body. No, I mean, there's a clear thing that's happening there. You can't use your body to violate other bodies. And so when you are committing an abortion, you are violating a fetus. And there's Like the most famous bodily rights argument would probably be Judith Jarvis Thompson, as I mentioned earlier, where she came up with the violinist argument. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the violinist argument at all, are you?
I think I've heard about it, but refresh my memory.
Yeah, so the violinist argument is essentially um, like imagine you wake up one day and you're plugged into a world famous violinist, and the Society of Music Lovers, um, kind of kidnapped you overnight and did this to you. And so the doctor comes to you and he says, "Hey, I'm really sorry this has happened, but the violinist had a fatal kidney ailment, and the Society of Music Lovers did some research and they found out that you were the only person who has the correct blood type to sustain the life of this individual. So they kidnapped you overnight while you were asleep, and they plugged you into the violinist against your will. And now your blood is circulating through his kidneys and is repairing him of his kidney ailment. Now you could unplug at any time, but just knowing that in doing so, it will result in the death of the violinist. And then the question that Judith Jarvis Thompson asks is, are you morally obligated to stay plugged into the violinist? And most people would say that no, you're not morally obligated to stay plugged into the violinist. Like very intuitively, you're not morally obligated. And then she says, well, if you're not obligated to, if you can unplug from the violinist, then why can't you unplug, so to speak, from a fetus? The issue with this argument is that it is extraordinarily disanalogous. And, first of all, most college students recognize this immediately is that you can only use this to defend the case of rape, right? Most cases, the vast majority of abortions, about 99.5% of them, occur by choice. Like when the conception was made by choice, there wasn't any sexual assault involved. So if that's the case, then you can't really use the argument to defend a prima facie case of abortion. And that's one thing, especially in responsibility, especially is an aspect of it, being that you played the causal role in the creation of a being with a needy nature. It would be like accepting a toddler into my house and then, if there's a blizzard outside, me randomly being like, I'm not compelled to hold this child within my house, so I'm just gonna like push him out of the house into the blizzard and let him die. And you were responsible for bringing him into the house, so that most people would say that no, you can't really like forcibly and violently remove a child from your home into a blizzard in which they will die, and that would be murder. Like when you're forcing them into an environment they can't survive in, that's murder. And the other disanalogy is particularly about killing versus letting die. And in the case of the violinist, unplugging from the violinist, you are allowing the violinist to die. You're letting the kidney ailment essentially take its course, and you are failing to save the violinist's life. And now that's usually fine, but in the case of abortion, you are taking steps, intentional steps that cause the chain of sequences of death. So you are directly killing the human child in this case. And so that's very wrong to do because, yeah, sure, let's say the violinist, you may not be obligated to save the violinist's life, but, you would probably think that you can't just like come up to him and like shoot him in the head too. Like surely he has the right not to be killed by you. And so it's kind of a distinction between positive and negative rights, is that, sure, like, you don't have the violinist doesn't have a positive right of having you sustain his life, so you don't have to stay plugged in, but he does have the negative right of not being killed, and so you can't murder him. And so the same would apply to the case of abortion, is that in a prima facie case of abortion, the fetus is perfectly healthy, so there's nothing that is going to kill the fetus that you are the cause of. And so once you start an abortion, then you are killing the fetus. And so if we're going to assume that the fetus is a person already, which is what Thompson is doing, then you can't just kill a person based off of your own will. There are many, many more disanalogies. I mean, the other thing is like a parent and child disanalogy, or like a kind of like degree of compulsion between there. It's because you know, the thing is that when you say a fetus has a right to life, and then you say that every case of abortion it's is okay, like what Thompson does, then like that's just a right to life in name only. That doesn't mean anything. And we know that if a fetus has a right to life, that must come with a degree of compulsion of being sustained by the mother. And this is true, and we can see this for an infant, right? So let's go back to the fetus later and go to the infant right now. Is that an infant is, an infant has and requires compulsion from a parent to survive. Otherwise, if you leave an infant alone, you are violating his right to life. He will die if he's not cared for. And so you can't just be like, okay, I'm going to stop feeding my toddler. I'm going to stop providing shelter to my toddler. I'm just going to kind of push him out into the wilderness and let him live on his own. That it doesn't work that way. You're violating his right to life by doing that. And if you're not violating his right to life by doing that, then an infant doesn't have a right to life, and that would be a logical absurdity. And so, if Thompson is saying that a fetus has a right to life, then surely the only way in which a fetus could survive through the use of a uterus would then be something that he is compelled to have. So that's the only way a fetus can survive. And so, if a fetus has a right to life, then the only way he can survive is the thing that he is obligated to have. And so you can't that then that's also disanalogous because you know most healthy people don't need you to be plugged into them to survive. So violinists with a fatal kidney ailment would not require that. There's a lot more disanalogies I could get into as well, like extraordinary versus ordinary care. I think this will probably be the last one I'll get into because I don't want to ramble on too long. Um, but essentially, ordinary care is basically everything that a healthy individual would need to survive. So, basic things like food, living in their natural environment, having their natural nutrition. There's nothing extraordinary about needing to eat if you're healthy, So this is something that people are kind of obligated to have. Extraordinary care, on the other hand, is essentially defined as doing everything possible to help save an individual. So, for instance, if your son is like if there's like an infant who is very sick and we don't have a cure to his disease, and the doctor says like, okay, well we can, cryogenically freeze him for about 150 years, and there might be a cure by the time he gets up. And it's like we wouldn't really be obligated to do that because then that would lead to the absurdity that we should be basically freezing everyone who is about to die from a disease and keeping them alive until we have a cure for them. And so that's not really, that would classify as extraordinary means of care, something that you could do, but you're not obligated to do it. You're not morally obligated to do it. And so the case of the violinist is extraordinary care because usually you don't have to just like, use your body to constantly sustain the life of an individual who is unhealthy and suffering from a fatal kidney ailment. Um, but the fetus using a uterus to survive and go through pregnancy, every single human being has had to go through that at some point. And so I mean, that's like one of the most ordinary things ever is that, every healthy individual who is born needs nutrition and needs to live in their natural environment. And every human fetus has at some point needed a uterus. And that is exactly what the uterus provides is the natural nutrition for a fetus and the natural environment for a fetus. So it's like you can't force someone out of their natural environment because that would be killing them. I can't like take some person and just like shove them under the water. That's murder. Can't humans can't live underwater. And if a fetus has a right to life, you can't just like take him and shove him into an environment where he can't survive in. That's also murder. And you can't just deprive him of all nutrition. Like you can't like stop a human being, a born human being from everything that they have, all their food from their fridge. You can't just like steal all the food and not let them go outside. That would also be murder because you're just starving them to death. And so if we assume a fetus has a right to life, then we can't deprive a fetus of the basic functions that the uterus provides to it. And so those are like the kind of the key disanalogies to the violinist argument. And if we want to put it up in this like, kind of wrap it up nicely and be kind of digestible, there's actually a counter thought experiment that I made, and I call this the fun plug example. So imagine I have a fun plug, and this fun plug has like a 1 in 10 chance of making anyone I plug into dependent on me for their survival. And let's say, one day I go into my 2-year-old child's room while he's asleep. Um, and I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna test out this fun plug, and I plug it into him, and oh, by surprise, now he is completely dependent on me to survive. Would it then be acceptable for me to like brutally murder him to unplug if that's the only way I can unplug? Like, obviously not. Like, I mean, what you just did there is you just went into your child's room, who you're caring for, caused him to caused his condition to be such a way, and then you just completely brutally murdered him. That's obviously wrong. You have completely violated him. But that case is far more disanalogous to sorry, that case is far more analogous to pregnancy than the violinist argument is, and that kind of repairs the thought experiment a bit. So that is how I would kind of wrap up that bodily rights arguments. I know I've talked for quite a bit on that, but I think it's something that just completely fails under logical and philosophical scrutiny.
Yeah, I think that was some wicked reasoning and some good analogies that really explains it well. So thank you for taking the time. You've really thought that out really well, and that's awesome and impressive. Hopefully that'll catch some people's ears and make them think in ways they maybe haven't thought of before. What about the trans stuff? Why did kids, John Paul, not have a right to, well, I guess in question, do what they want with their body? Be that cutting off body parts or taking drugs, things like that.
Right. Now, I would say that in this case, it is less of an issue of bodily rights and more of an issue of being able to plan for yourself properly in the future. And I also don't really think that there's a strong case for just like plain and complete bodily autonomy. And, like you can't really, I think it's kind of absurd to say like, okay, well, can you like go to the doctor and say like, oh, I kind of identify as a pirate now. Can you like chop off my left leg? Like, I don't think I don't know. I mean, some people might debate that, but I don't really think you have a right to chop off your leg out of nowhere. Um, but it's kind of
The
like
doc the
a thing
doctors
more so.
wouldn't be allowed to morally,
Right.
ethically.
Yeah, exactly. So
But
it's the
again,
same thing with the
in this one certain circumstance, there's some weird exception.
right. Yes, so like exactly that. Like the doctors morally would not be allowed to chop off your leg because you identify as a pirate. And there's actually even conditions where people think they're paralyzed, and so forth, and then that's where the question comes in, is if you should medically intervene to make that delusion a reality. And so in the case of the transgender issue, what we see a lot of the times is that kids are unable to make decisions for themselves that will greatly alter and impact their life and be in their future. We do this for things that are as basic as getting a tattoo. In most states, you can't even get a tattoo until you're over the age of 18, or if you're like 16 is usually the youngest that we've seen. And usually, even when you're 16, you need permission from a parent to be able to get a tattoo. You can't drive until you're 16. You can't vote until you're 18. You can't drink until you're 21. So there's all these things like, why do we have these laws in place? And we have these laws in place because we know that when your brain hasn't developed enough, that you are not in the position to make life-altering decisions. And we've also found that puberty is probably the greatest cure to gender dysphoria. What isn't a good cure to gender dysphoria is chopping off healthy breasts, chopping off healthy private parts, prescribing someone to have hormone therapy and puberty blockers. We know, especially based on recent studies, like the Oxford study that was done a few months ago, that this just leads to more depression, anxiety, and suicide. And I mean, it should be pretty clear that when you're completely reversing the course of nature, that something wrong is going to happen. We know that it's bad for your bones. So if you care about having a skeleton at all, maybe you should consider not getting all this hormone therapy. So I think it's clearly absurd to say that, like, that that kids have bodily rights to chop off their body parts. And I think even if they did, it wouldn't be, we shouldn't allow it just because, just on the basis of it not, I mean, when have we ever made the cure to a condition an affirmation of that condition? Like if someone is anorexic, you don't say like, you know what, you're right. You're so fat, and actually I'm gonna put you on a diet where you're gonna have to fast for a week. And like that doesn't make any sense. They're like you don't do that with we don't do that with any condition. This is the only condition in which the left has somehow like magically brought forth in which you can affirm someone's delusion. There's also a rare condition in which someone believes that they're a cow. Like they literally just believe they're a cow, but we're not gonna like, start putting them on farms and stuff and put them with their cow friends. So we don't do this when someone is experiencing a delusion that goes away from reality. You don't affirm that delusion. You tell them that they're wrong in the nicest way possible, and you try to get them to come to terms with that reality. And so that way they can grow up and they can be less depressed, they can be less anxious, and they won't commit suicide from just being completely like thrown in mentally everywhere. So, I mean, I don't see at all how you would have a right to chop off your body parts. And I don't think, and also any right that would, I'm also like very much against rights that would require compulsion from some other individual. Like typically I am on like the abortion thing. Like there might be like a compulsion things that's going on. I don't really think it's like too compulsory. That's kind of like some deeper thing I could get into. But people will often say things like a right to health care, like a right to bodily mutilation, a right to education.
Yeah,
And
well, look,
when that
kids
right,
obviously cannot consent to anything.
exactly, exactly. So like there's this thing going on with like Planned Parenthood treating kids as adults now, and it's like you can't treat kids as adults because they're not adults and they can't think like adults and their brains haven't developed like adults, and so they don't know what's going on. You're right, they can't consent to it.
Yeah, kids can't consent. I think that everyone has a right to puberty. It's becoming obvious with the studies all around the world at this point, including here, that affirming delusions does not help. It makes things worse. So, what about the idea that would you, the black male crazy lie, how would you respond to would you rather have a living son or a dead daughter? And what would you say to someone who says that, oh, but if you don't stop the puberty, then they're never going to be able to have the chance to reverse that again because it's going to go through.
I think these are absolutely ludicrous statements and are completely disingenuous, and I have become more and more infuriated
They're
even.
made like daily though by millions of
They
people.
are. They are, because at this point, that's the only thing they feel they have is like the whole thing. Would you rather have like a dead daughter or a living son? Like that's ridiculous. I mean, first of all, it's not true. I mean, if you have gender dysphoria, like I mentioned earlier, the biggest
It's
cure to
not
that
true.
is to go through puberty. There's no case in which you affirm a delusion in order to cure that person of that delusion. Someone who's schizophrenic, you don't start like making all their their imaginations come true and into reality. That doesn't help. So it's like there's something deeply wrong with a person's mental state if they think they are living in a different body than what they're meant to be in. And that's completely tragic, I think. And I'm not like one thing that I've kind of want to be clear is that we shouldn't try to vilify trans people because they're definitely victims of all of this. Because they're definitely being confused and propagated by the left. I mean, there's we should do everything that we can to help people who are suffering. And I think that when we're doing that, the thing that we don't do is mutilate children and put them on hormone therapy. And so, again, the thing like, would you rather have a dead son or a living daughter? Um, I don't think, I don't think that's true. That's just not true at all. I mean, I don't think that if you don't get the treatment, that you'll have a dead son. There's no evidence to support that. There's, and on the other hand, there's actually ample
The CAS
evidence.
files and the HSS report show the opposite. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so there's mountains of evidence suggesting that when you go forth with the treatment, it's actually going to make your child more suicidal. So, so it shouldn't be,
But
would
John
you rather
Paul, we
have a
have a
dead
whole
son?
class of doctors, psychologists that are not just stating that lie all the time, but they genuinely believe it, even though it might be provably untrue, and they are genuinely saying it to parents and children every single day in America in every single state. How is it so deeply intertwined? Such a big lie.
I think the reason for that is not super difficult to address, and it's money. When you affirm once you get a child on treatment like this, that's a forever patient. That's a lifelong patient. You will have whether they continue being transgender or whether they stop being trans and want to detransition, you're going to force them on medication. You're going to force them to get surgeries, and then they're going to need some way to reverse that once they figure out how terrible of a decision they've made. And so it's like regardless, like even if they don't want to detransition, um, you're gonna have to constantly go to the doctor if you engage in transgender treatment for your entire life. If you detransition, you're gonna have to go to the doctor constantly your entire life. And so once it starts, that's where that then the money just keeps coming in, and these operations are really, really expensive. As far as like whether or not they really believe it, I mean, it's scary how much you can make people believe things, smart people believe things that are just completely wrong. And we see this all over academia. And it's kind of like a very similar question to like why is the intellectual space completely dominated by the same ideas? And academics are just not willing to challenge each other anymore. And we kind of I think Thomas Sowell puts this very nicely, and he has a book on it. I think it's called Intellectuals in Society. And it's like they believe that they have monopolized the class of ideas and that they have found the answer to ethics and they are morally superior. And so they have this kind of construction of society that they build up that they think is right, that is completely based off of theory and not based off of any practical metric at all. And so we see this occurring throughout society, and as in these classes where you're saying there's doctors and psychologists and a whole bunch of people who believe this nonsense. It's like they think it's kind of like a new thing too that's coming along, and usually new ideas are things that people are heavily gravitated towards. And so I think there's definitely incentives to provide these treatment because of money reason. Money is definitely a big incentive, and just feeling that you have an intellectual monopolization over ideas and that you know what's correct and true, but also because it goes against really our fundamental beliefs about tradition and about objective reality and about truth, is that it starts twisting the narrative towards a postmodern neo-Marxist social constructivist lens. And so when you say that, okay, well, a man and a woman aren't objective things, like just because someone's biologically a male doesn't mean he is actually a male, because someone could look like a woman, act like a woman, and seem like a woman. And how could we say then that this person is a man, right? That's like generally the social constructivist argument. And they try to apply that to basically everything. And that's what the neo-Marxists do, is they say everything is fluid and that everything is just social construction and based off of how everyone is perceiving the world. And that's not the case. And for the vast majority of human history, basically the entirety of it, we have accepted that there is objective truth in things. And this then applies to things like morality. They use the social constructivism to say, well, morality is a social construct, so really there is no right and wrong, only gray areas, and it's really up to the individual to decide for themselves what they think is right or wrong. It's like, no, that's not true. Like, we have to submit to a moral authority that actually exists. And they do this for everything, and it's really like a way to just like deny any fact you want and to get to any conclusion you want to get to. So it's a really a good political move. It's a really good political stunt from the left, because once you have social constructivism on your side, then anything can be true. And so I think this whole thing of class of doctors, psychologists, and members of society who are really believing this nonsense and perpetrating it throughout our lives is runs very deep. It runs very deep, and it's very corrupt and sinister. And we should do everything that we can to stop it and to affirm truth and reality.
I agree with you, man. We need to do everything we can to stop it, to protect children. What do you think about the fact, though, do parents have the right to stop their own children from doing what they want? Or is that where the state should step in and perhaps consider taking those children so that they can seek gender affirming care or whatever it may be from the parents, as we've seen in states like California, Washington, Colorado? What do you think about that parental rights issue between sort of the government and parents?
Yeah, well, parents absolutely have the right to have their kid not get their body parts mutilated. And the reason why is very basic. It's a very simple answer, really. Kids can't consent to things, so their parents need to consent on their behalf. And so when you say that the government should take over, custody of kids, I trust parents to most parents are good at raising their kids. Um, not in all cases. So in the things in which they do things wrong, we have to make sure we prevent that. But I digress because in this case, we know very strongly that kids can't consent to these things. So they need their parent to consent to things. That's why usually a parent would need to sign for their children to attend a field trip. As most, sometimes because kids can't consent to being taken to somewhere else, so they need parents' permission. Usually, parents are the ones consenting for their child to be involved in like beauty pageants or things like that, certain competitions they consent for. They decide which school they go to, or at least they should have the right to. And so, you know, parents are raising their kids because their kids need to be raised and they need to know what right or wrong is. And the best way to do that is probably through the use of parents, not through the use of some arbitrary government entity that is claiming that they somehow know how to raise your kids better than you do. And it's very it's never a good idea to say the government should be in control of someone else's kids. I mean, firstly, they're your biological kids, so I don't know why anyone would be in favor of taking families apart unless it's absolutely necessary to. And we just see more and more of, like parents, parents needing to consent for kids on their behalf because kids need to learn from stuff. The thing is with the whole government state thing is that we do not have a perfect government and we never will. Same way as we will never have perfect parents, right? It's just something that doesn't exist. And the current rule of the government, the current party that's ruling the government, if the government rules your kids, that's the current party that is going to be ruling your kids. So it's constantly changing, and it's probably not something that will align with your values. And at some point, it's definitely going to be wrong if it's not the same thing, because there can only be one right thing, really. And so it's very ideological, definitely, but it's a very ideal situation in which we assume a perfect government exists, and then we can, maybe raising kids through the government would be a good decision, but through a completely practical and moral lens, there is no way in which we should allow that.
I'm totally with you, man. You're very good at intellectually explaining these things, and I'm really thankful to actually be talking to you. I want to rapid fire you a little bit on some questions. So, first one, free speech. Do we have a right to free speech?
Yes.
Why? What about hate speech? It hurts someone's feelings or
Yeah,
makes
okay.
them.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get too into it because it's like rapid fire, but um I've actually had a debate on this before, like at a tournament
No, give me
level.
a little bit at
But
least.
I will. I'll give you a little bit. Um so yeah, so the thing that the reason why you can't regulate hate speech or false political speech is that there's really two problems of it. It's like, what is hate and who defines it, right? So while like hate speech is absolutely bad and absolutely wrong, and there's definitely examples of hate speech, when you have an entity that is sort of arbitrarily defining what is hate, and like that is you get to like that's just that leads to so many wrong outcomes in society. It's completely unimaginable that when a government controls speech, they can practically control anything at that point. When you're too afraid to hear an idea, that you want to completely silence it. And I hate speech. Like, look, like for example, like like okay, do you really don't want to hear what the Nazis have to say? And like I'm not saying that because Nazis are good, obviously. They're terrible people, but these are our enemies and you want to silence them? What do you do when they, get into power and when they start uprising and when they get super popular and their movement comes forth? Like, don't you want to have a strategy to fight against that? So you really don't want to know what your enemies have to say. So I mean I think that I want to talk to everyone. I want to hear what everyone has to say so I could be prepared for as many things as possible. And when you're not prepared to, fight against your opponents, then that leads to that leaves you very vulnerable and wide open to attack. And so I don't think that a government entity can define hate, because then whoever's in power is just going to define whatever they don't like as hate and try to like blur the lines between things that are hateful and things that are just maybe someone just passionately explaining their beliefs. And so you can't let someone who's literally, the only person who could really define that is God. And so you can't like leave it up to a government entity to define what is hateful.
Okay, free speech. Absolutist. I'm with you there. The Second Amendment. Do we have a right to bear arms?
Absolutely. And people always bring this up all the time. They're like, oh, they bring up mass shootings, they bring up gun crime, they bring up reasons why we should completely ban guns. And we know based off of the evidence and statistics surrounding us that this is actually that this I think the Second Amendment is a great law and that prevents a lot of crime. Cities that have stricter gun control laws have more gun crime than cities that are looser on gun control. Um, we know that I believe it was Australia that after they banned guns, gun crime actually went up, and that was because the bad people who had guns illegally were able to use their guns without fear of the good people having guns. In Britain, when they banned guns, um, gun crime gun crime did go down, but it was at the same rate as it was already going down before they banned guns, so there was no significant impact that the gun control law had. Um, and in the United States, more people are literally kicked to death than they are by gunshots. Like more people die from being kicked to death than they die from being shot by a gun. And so it's like, should we ban feet? Like I don't know. Like it's completely absurd. I mean, so the right makes like a self-defense argument all the time when it comes to gun control. And so gun control, I would say more prominently than self-defense, is a deterrence of crime. When there's knowledge that you're in an area where many people own guns, maybe that'll force you to act better or to not be as, you know, loose with how you obey the law. So, I mean, personally, I know if someone has a gun, I'm not even going to try to upset him, let alone try to rob him. So I think it's very much a deterrence of crime when guns exist in society. And so, yeah, you should have the right to bear arms.
Okay, right to bear arms. War. What do you think about war? And do you think that we should be playing Team America World Police in the world? And what do you think about the Israel Palestine Russia Ukraine thing going on?
Right. I would call myself anti-war, in that I would say that we should only have war when it is completely necessary. And there's a lot of political parties, I think especially the left is very big on war. Um, I mean, FDR was licking his chops as soon as Japan bombed Pearl Harbor because he couldn't wait to get into war to get us out of the recession. But that's like you can't play with people's lives like that. You have to know, and the majority of these wars that we get into is usually completely the fault of the government and very little the fault of the people. And like in the case of like Israel Palestine, The Hamas are clearly terrible people, but most Palestinian people and Palestinian kids who may be suffering the negative consequences of war, um, they don't really deserve it. There's so many innocent people who don't deserve to die just because their government is screwed up. Um, but that being said, there's definitely like really hard cases in which war is necessary. I mean, on October 7th, we saw one of the most violent acts from a terrorist organization occur against Israel. And I think Israel definitely has the right to defend itself. Luckily, it looks like Trump is brokering a ceasefire between Israel and in Gaza. So hopefully that should occur soon. But very much in favor of ending wars fast. So what I would call it the lethal first blow, is that if you have to get into a war, make it, and this deters wars from starting anyways, because if you have this type of policy, which is like Trump's peace through strength policy, then you very much deter people from getting into these foreign conflicts. And so it's like it's like you become really strong, and then when a war starts, you make an incredibly strong first blow, and then you completely scare everyone away from engaging in a war further, and and then hopefully that ends the war and you have more peace in society. So, and the thing with Russia and Ukraine, it's very clear that Vladimir Putin wants to take more and more land, as much land as possible. Once he's done with Ukraine, he's going to be wanting to move to the next. I think like what we saw in Biden's administration was incredibly distasteful, with just kind of like making no efforts to actually end the war and just sending billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine. I think at this point, what needs to be done, since Russia doesn't want to end the war, is exactly what Trump's doing, actually, which is saying, okay, you have 50 days to end the war, and then if the war's not over by then, we're just basically going to make it extremely expensive for you. So I think at this point, that's really the best policy decision we can make going forth with Russia, is making the war extremely expensive for them. So that way, like at least, like even though even though Ukraine basically can't possibly win the war unless some other foreign nation gets involved to an extremely large degree. At least, like, once this war is over, Russia would be too poor to invade other nations. Uh, and so, as long as we keep Russia poor, I think we would be doing very well moving forward. But that's my whole take on like the war thing: is have as little wars as possible. Don't play with people's lives. There's definitely instances where people's lives are being played with for political purposes, where they're sometimes choosing who to let live and who to let die. And I don't think that's very moral, and I don't think there's many reasons that would allow for you to kill someone. Unfortunately, innocent people may have to die in war sometimes because that's just a necessary aspect of it. But that's also the reason why we should have as little war as possible. So that's my take on the whole thing.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. Peace is always better than war. Okay, I've got a hard one for you. Jeffrey Epstein, did he kill himself? And beyond that, why haven't the American people gotten what they were promised, which is at a minimum a lot more information than we have received about what his crimes really consisted of?
Personally, I'm actually very agnostic as to whether or not he killed himself, but I would say it's very I need this is something like the details of Jeffrey Epstein is something that I've been wanting to look more into, but just seeing the whole thing, I honestly I believed Kash Patel at first when he said Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, but then this whole thing about the client list came up, and I'm like, I don't know what to believe anymore. So I mean, very suspicious the circumstances of his death. He was not really suicidal. Everyone close to him says that he wasn't suicidal. It didn't really seem like he was the type of guy who would want to kill himself. Um, I mean, being prosecuted of all those things, maybe I could see how that could cause someone to be suicidal, but I don't think in Jeffrey Epstein's case he was very suicidal. That being said, I don't really want to make like a strong claim right now as to whether or not he definitely killed himself or definitely was murdered. But I would say the circumstances of it are very incredibly suspicious. Um, and then the whole thing with the clients list and getting things that we weren't, basically not getting the things that we were promised. It's like either way. I mean, I definitely think there's a client list. I would say the vast majority of people think there's a client list, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. I've very rarely seen. I've only met two people who think that there is no client list, and so it's just I think there's very clearly a client list. Like, why would Pam Bondi be lying for so long about there being videos, about there being a list, about there being all these things, and then there's no list, and turns out there's not really anything. Like that doesn't make sense. It's either really bad PR and she made a huge mistake, or they're just lying. Either way, it's kind of bad because it's bad for government transparency. So we don't know how much we can actually trust the government, and it sucks because they just completely screwed up, and there's no way to recover from it. It's like I said, it's an either or situation. Either we've been lied to and the government's not transparent, or we are being lied to and the government's not transparent. And so it's like there's complete distrust in the system now, and no one knows what they can trust from the government anymore, what they can believe. And really, I don't think that people are going to trust the government unless they release an Epstein file list that has like extremely prominent people like Bill Clinton, or people who are currently in Congress or at high positions of power and leadership. Like, people aren't going to trust the government until that happens. And so either that happens, and if there's really not a client list, then they're kind of really screwed there. But I think there is a client list, especially with what Maxwell has been saying recently, being willing to come forth to Congress to talk about Epstein. There's many people who are very close to him saying that there's definitely a list. His former lawyer came out and said, basically exactly this, that there's a client list, that he knows who's on the list, he knows why they're on the list, and he knows why they're being covered up. And so we have so many people in these positions. It's like, it's either the government's lying to us or all these people are lying to us. There's either way, there's a lot of lying going on. So it's incredibly hard to work out this whole situation. But I think I think just intuitively, and most people would accept this, that there is a cover up going up, a massive cover up.
Interesting. Okay. Aliens, UFOs, UAPs, real or fake?
I would say, okay, aliens. I'm not really an alien guy. I don't think aliens have visited yeah, I don't think aliens have visited the planet. Whether or not there's aliens out there, there might be aliens like light years away, and I don't know how interested they would be in exploring our planet. But I do think is always more likely than aliens is a government agency testing out classified military technology. And so I think one of the things that people bring up when they talk about aliens is they say there, oh, well, we're seeing multiple different people discover the same exact material, and it all looks really weird and strange, so it has to be aliens. And the technology, they say, is incredible. And it's like, I'm not really going to, unless the government comes out and says aliens exist. And at this point, if they say aliens exist, I don't know if I could trust them because of the Epstein stuff. Um, I would say that I don't think aliens have explored our planet, and I don't think there's all these things going on that people are saying is happening. So that would be my take. It's much more likely, again, that it's another government agency that's testing out their military technology that's classified. I mean, even stuff about the self bomber is still classified in the US government because they don't want us to know all the technology that they used for it. Of course, to protect us from foreign nations that would like to use that technology. It's you know, and of course the government would keep that classified if that's the case, because they're not gonna expose themselves with all their technology and everything that they're trying to test to use in military. So if that's true, then they're obviously gonna keep it classified. So no aliens.
Okay, no aliens. Uh, God, what's your best argument for why God exists?
Best argument for why God exists. There's many, many arguments I would make. Um, I think my favorite one would have to be the contingency argument. And the contingency argument basically goes like this. So we have to accept a principle of sufficient reason, which most people would accept, which basically says that there is an explanation for everything that exists, right? And what this means is that things either exist contingently or necessarily. To exist contingently means that you were brought about into existence by something else, right? So, like, we were brought about into existence by our parents, and they were brought by their parents' parents. Same thing as if I like had like I don't know like a pencil or something. The pencil is contingent upon being made in a factory, which is contingent upon the people making it. So we have evidence of all these things that are contingent that exist. Things that exist necessarily means that it is within their own nature to exist, so it cannot fail to not exist. Um, sorry, it cannot fail to exist, I should say. So the thing is that we have is contingent things. At some point, it has to go back to something that's necessarily existing. So you can't just have all these contingent things that were contingently caused by the other thing, because then the question always remains, well, what caused this contingent thing? And so when you have a necessary being that was the cause of the creation of all contingent things, then that would be a proper explanation to the universe. And so that would be my argument. If we want to put in a deductive way, it would be premise one. Things either exist by their own nature or from some external cause. Um, and then the universe, of course, there's the Big Bang. The universe is obviously contingent because it had a beginning. It is impossible for time to exist forever because if time is infinite and had no beginning, then we wouldn't be here now. Um, and the universe can obviously be changed in that, it's not really unthinkable that the chair I'm sitting on right now didn't have to exist, or that there's a part of the universe that could be different. We could not, Mars didn't have to exist. Mars could be completely non-existent, and that would be logically coherent. So, so as long as it's logically coherent that the universe is contingent, um, then it would follow that it would require a necessary being for its creation. And what would a necessary being look like if it was the creator of all matter, time, and space? Well, it would be timeless, immaterial, and spaceless. And of course, it would have to be powerful in order to create this all thing. It'd probably have to be all knowing to know everything. It'd probably have to be a personal being because you can't really have a cause of a universe that occurs um, through will if it comes from something that's mechanical. And so I would say that then all those conditions that I just mentioned would mean that a necessary being in the form of God created the universe. So I think that's my strongest argument for the existence of God. I mean, there's very more strong arguments like the teleological argument, the moral argument, there's the ontological argument, and of course the argument for the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which all of which I think if you just allowed the evidence to take you where it leads, you would come to the conclusion that the Christian God exists and that Christianity is true.
Yeah, I would also add that the fact that miracles happen all the time is pretty good evidence of something much bigger than us at play.
Right. I mean, I would say that
Okay,
the
my next
best miracle
question.
of all.
What?
Just real
Yeah,
quick, I would say the best miracle of all is the
what's that?
resurrection of Jesus.
Right, exactly. Miracle that I saved Sawyer. Miracle that Trump didn't get shot in the head in Pennsylvania. Just off the top of my head, those are big three.
That's
At
right.
least to me. Okay, Elon Musk. You brought up Mars, made me think. What do you think? What's your opinion on Elon Musk and what he's doing? Do you think we'll ever go to Mars? Do you think Mars is real? Do you think Elon Musk is smart? Someone told me the other day at a wedding that Elon Musk is dumb, which I thought was interesting.
Elon Musk is definitely not dumb. He has like stacks and stacks of books of knowledge that most people will never have in their life, no matter how hard they try. He's definitely a modern day genius. He has done so many things and continues to do so many things, and he's absolutely excellent in his field. I think he's not as great in politics. He kind of has like he's not the best speaker. He's gets a little bit too infuriated at times. So, we saw him crash out on Twitter over the big beautiful bill, which I do think is big and is definitely beautiful. Um, and so I think, and his whole
Is it
like
too big,
American
John
Party
Paul?
thing, is it too big? It's not too big.
Yeah, because it's Okay. I think I might disagree with you there, but go on.
Yeah, okay. We can discuss that. So yeah, so I think that Elon Musk is I don't think he's good in politics. I think it's kind of a shame that the whole thing happened between Trump and Elon. I think there does need to be more government cuts,
Me
the
too.
government spending cuts, but I also don't think that it is primarily a government spending bill. We know that based off of the type of bill it is, that it has to have something to do with government spending, but is not going to be the primary factor of the bill, you know. And so, and especially since government spending is something that is very tough for politicians, when you cut spending to areas that need to be cut, you're pissing off some people. And that happens all the time. And the issue is that with the big beautiful bill and with just government spending in general is that we're going into a point where our debt is going to be completely unstoppable, and we're going to have to default on our debt or something. And what's probably going to happen is in
That's the
is in
point I
10
was gonna say to
years.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, what's probably going to happen in 10 years if you don't have more government spending cuts is we're just going to have like really high taxes, like 20% income tax. Our generation is going to receive the least amount of government social benefits, and we're so all that's going to occur, and it's going to be really devastating for the this upcoming generation. And so I think there is a really strong place for more libertarian government spending cuts. And I don't know if ICE should be funded more than the Italian military. So I think that's I mean I do appreciate ICE, and I think we need ICE to get work on deporting immigrants. Um, but I don't think they should use that much of a budget. Um, and so I mean I think in general I am in favor of the big beautiful bill. I think it's a great bill. I don't think it's a perfect bill, but I don't think we should shove out the great for the perfect. And I think Elon Musk was kind of being unfair and didn't really understand the law when he crashed out over the government spending cuts. And I think that there will be a future bill in Trump's administration that tries to kind of attack government spending a lot more. I do think Trump is kind of a big government guy, and that is like one thing I wish he was a little bit more small government. Um, but the issue is if there's more debates to be had involving government spending in the big beautiful bill, then the bill wouldn't be out right now. It wouldn't have been passed. So we need another bill where libertarian conservatives are extremely adamant about implementing government spending cuts. And then I think that would be a good bill to push out and to hopefully pass through Congress. But in general, I don't think that was the primary purpose of the Big Beautiful Bill. So I think to say it's a bill that shouldn't have passed, like Elon Musk's did, because of that reason, I think that is completely unfair. Um, and I think it's kind of a shame that this whole situation between Elon and Trump went down because they should really be working together. I mean, this is like the one thing that Elon Musk disagrees with on Trump. And it's like, well, you agree on like 95% of other things. Why don't you just team up, put your differences aside, and don't make an American party that will only split the votes between the two parties that are more favorable and get the bad party elected? And so I think Elon should take down this American Party thing because it's not going to go anywhere. He might take like 5% of the votes for the conservatives, and then you'll get like AOC elected. And trust me, AOC is not going to implement more government spending cuts than Trump is. So I think they need to work together still. I think they could forgive each other for the things they said, and I think they should continue being political partners. But Elon Musk maybe shouldn't be in like the limelight as much as he was before. Um, but that's generally my whole take on the situation.
Yeah, Elon's a smart guy for sure. I hope that him and Trump can, you know, work together to make America's future brighter. I think he's someone that's helpful, you know, person to make a positive impact for society as far as the bill goes. I mean, you made my argument for me. The only thing I would add, I guess, is that, the amount of government spending we're doing, besides the fact that it's, going to default at some point or who knows what will happen, we haven't even gone back. We just go up and up every year, no matter what, no matter who's president, even red or blue. And we haven't even gone back to the point of the giant increase from the COVID spending. We're still at that level. We need to go back to at least the pre-COVID level where they jumped it up in an insane amount, but instead we're still hanging on to this COVID level spending. Why is that?
Right. And I think it's because um, politicians in general, and this is goes for each party, are very scared to take away funding from anything. Again, because it's never really a politically good move to cut funding because you're going to anger someone. Like if you cut Medicaid, you're going to get the entire left like rallying up and being like, "Oh, they're trying to take away our health care and all these things." And it's like Social Security is going to go bankrupt in a few years. We're going to pay into Social Security and taxes, and none of Gen Z is going to see it. We're not going to see a single cent of Social Security and all these government programs that can't sustain themselves. The government is extremely inefficient at things. They are not incentivized to actually innovate, whereas a competitive free market would be. And so it's if government spending is, Milton Friedman had this theory that government spending is the worst kind of spending that you can do. And he did this by kind of like having like two lines across where there's like spending that you do for yourself versus spending that you do for others. Um, and like where the money is from. So like let's say you're using your own money and spending that on yourself. You're going to be very cautious about the price and very cautious about the quality. So you're going to care about those two things. But if it's the opposite, if you're spending someone else's money on something that is for someone else, you're not really going to care about either. You're not going to care about the price and you're not going to care about the quality. And that's exactly what we see in government spending. They use taxpayers' money to pay for taxpayers, but they're instead of just letting the taxpayers pay for the things themselves, they pay it through the government. And that's not effective at all. The taxpayers would be much better using their own money, spending the things that they think they need the most, instead of the government using it. Because what we see is we see the government is extremely inefficient. We see that the government spends a whole lot of money and they waste a whole lot of time, and then the quality that they pump out is like really bad. Like, I mean, have you ever been to the DMV and gone out and said, "Hey guys, I think that should be in charge of my health care"? Like I don't think anyone has ever been through a government agency process and wanted them to be in control of more things. And so I guess I'm kind of like ranting about government spending, but in general, why haven't we seen the reduction of government spending since like COVID? Because COVID increased government spending by a lot, and it's not really going down. And it's usually because when you start spending into something, then the politicians are afraid to take that spending away, and they need to be less afraid to take that spending away. Luckily, Donald Trump's doing much better at cutting spending than any Democrat would. Um, but usually, the unfortunate truth is that with each upcoming administration, the question isn't whether or not government spending is going to increase or not, but it's going to be by how much or how little is it going to increase. And so I think that's very unfortunate, but the politicians are just unwilling to actually go through the tough dialogue and the tough debates and actually make the tough decisions to cut things and it would have to be probably very crucial things at this point. We'd have to do completely radical government spending cuts, and that would definitely include like getting rid of Social Security, getting rid of Medicare, Medicaid, and a lot of other things that people think, especially people on the left, think are very necessary, but would actually be better if we had a free market running them anyways. But it's just going to be a huge pain. It's going to be a lot of turmoil to go through. And I honestly don't, at this point, don't think it's going to happen. I think we're just going to have 20% income taxes and we're not going to receive any government benefits. So I think that's the obvious answer at this point, especially if a Democrat administration comes along and funds more wars and funds more things that don't need to be funded. And so that's the current state of the whole, government spending thing.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that sounds about right. I wonder if there's not some sort of solution. Like, do we the people have any right to say what our government is spending on? Is there like the potential for us? This is super random, but for us to maybe have it on the ballot what our tax dollars are going towards or something like that?
So usually certain things like spending is of course controlled by Congress, which is why the big beautiful bill wasn't something that Trump could have just done through like an executive order or a future spending bill he can't do through an executive order. So it's really for the voters. I think the best thing we can do is to increase messaging about this and to become more passionate about it. And it kind of sucks because it's like it's electorally, it's not very advantageous to want to cut Social Security, right? Like people don't want their Social Security taken away from them.
No, it's not
But
riling
the
people
unfortunate
up
thing,
like kids being mutilated and babies being murdered, you know? It's
exactly,
just
yeah.
not as
So it's very, very unfortunate
making it
that it's not,
difficult.
you know, people like having their government benefits, um, even if they're not seeing how inefficient it is and like how damaging it really is. And so I think if people knew, of course, the like the economic theory behind it, they would be very much inclined to vote in favor of more radical libertarian government spending cuts, which are really the things that we need. But the only real way we can do it now is if that sort of messaging became strong within the Republican Party, and in like the next presidential election, presidential primary, we put someone forth who is willing to engage in government spending cuts. Hopefully, JD Vance is someone who would be willing to engage in more government spending cuts. But I am kind of like cautiously optimistic that Trump will engage in policy decisions or encourage Congress to, um, increase or decrease government spending. The only issue would be is if in the midterms we lose control of the House to the Democrats, which is possible and might happen at this point. Um, so I'm just hoping we could get out like a government spending cut bill in time before then.
Yeah, that'd be great to see. What other issues matter to you, Jean Paul, as far as America goes moving forward? Do you feel that this transgender thing is going to end anytime soon? Do you feel the abortion thing is going to end anytime soon? You just kind of explained that you do see, hopefully, some positive, linings towards stopping government spending. How do you view these other things going down? Are they going to end? Are they going to continue? How do you see the world looking in the next 10 years?
Right. So I mean, the right has won in politics currently, and we need to win in culture now. And so, you know, Donald Trump had an incredibly good election, and I think JD Vance could have an even better one if the current trajectory of the Trump administration keeps up. And so I think culture is definitely something we need to focus on because once we have the culture, then it becomes easy to ban abortion in the States, becomes easy to forget about the transgender nonsense. I think the transgender like policies and ideology coming from the left, I think that's going to end soon, or at least it's going to be kind of like, like cast aside. Might be something, I think the new position of the left might be like a more, maybe like a more libertarian take on it, where it's like, okay, well, I don't really care if someone, wants to dress up as a certain thing, but um, I mean, we see it in Gavin Newsom even going against like men competing in women's sports or changing in the same locker rooms as they are. So I think they'll probably be more against the like kind of I think that they'll definitely switch to being more against any interaction that the transgender movement would have between involving men and women's things, so far as they will like try to they'll definitely above 18 keep up like the like gender surgery and therapy like for people above 18. Whether or not they do it for kids, I think they would like to do it for kids, and they're probably still going to try to do that. Whether or not it'll be electorally feasible, we'll have to see. And I think that's especially for someone like Gavin Newsom. He really cares more about um, obtaining power, and his views aren't really anything that he's very that he's really an advocate for. He doesn't like hold beliefs. He just holds whatever makes the person in front of him like him the most. And
Did
so
you
that's
watch him on the Sean Ryan show? I just listened to it yesterday. A 4 hour long podcast. He went on Sean Ryan.
I did not see that.
It's very interesting, and he tries to act exactly how you're saying, even though, a lot of his actions don't seem to back up the words that come out of his mouth, in my opinion.
Exactly. Exactly. So we'll definitely have well, we're definitely going to have a left that's going to keep trying to um, have the transgender stuff involved in our lives as much as possible, but they're probably going to like put it on the back seat for now because of how electorally disadvantageous it is. So I think the right has definitely won on that issue. On the abortion issue is very tough and very unfortunate. I think it's a fight that's always worth fighting for, and it's something I'm always going to support, no matter how electorally disadvantageous it is. But unfortunately, I don't know if Trump would have gotten elected if he advocated for a national abortion ban. I don't know if it was possible. I mean, I don't think legally it's even possible to implement an abortion ban. What I think the pro-life movement needs to do right now is to engage in incremental policy making and to slowly shift the culture towards more pro-life movement. So definitely do more debates. Um, talk about the pro-life issue as much as you can. Be very sharp on the issue as well. And I think certain incremental policy decisions, like we need more regulations on abortion pills because they're not really safe, and we know they're not safe, and they're not complying to the regulation. So we need to actually enforce the regulation on the abortion pills. We need to and honestly make it as expensive as possible. Is a really good incremental pro-life move is to make sure that it's anything that could deter someone from having an abortion. And that's really the key thing to policy making, is you either de-incentivize bad behavior or incentivize good behavior. So I think all of our policy making decisions should rely on those two things. So we should rely on de-incentivizing people from getting abortions, and we should rely on incentivizing people to, I guess, go forth, like not terminate their pregnancies, to not get abortions. So those two things should be done. De-incentivize abortion, incentivize parenthood. I guess. I mean, mostly like just a- anything that would stop someone from getting an abortion is a good policy. Any policy that reduces abortion is a good policy to me. And I think that the pro-life movement can be very clever as to how we create policy. And I think it's also importantly over everything to actually shift the culture to be more pro-life.
I'm with you, man. It's That's really good to hear. You were recently asked on the Charlie Kirk show, I believe at SAS, what the three most important issues were, and you said protect the kids, protect the kids, protect the kids, which I very much appreciate you doing that. It's wonderful to see. Why is that all three answers could be the just one answer? What is it that makes kids so, obviously I agree with you, but so important?
Right. And I think I even mentioned this around the beginning of this episode, which was that there are most vulnerable members of society. There are most innocent members of society, and they are our future. They're completely our future. Kids are going to change the world. I mean, no matter what, it necessarily follows their generation of society, so they will change the world. And I think that the left has been engaging in actions in belief systems in policy making that is completely damaging to kids, that is completely um, it's completely ruining their livelihoods and completely ruining how society sees them. I mean, you go to Student Action Summit and someone will say like you'll have these politicians saying, like one of the greatest things that they've done in their life is become a parent. And like I'm very happy to see that the audience will roar into applause. But I feel like if you said the same thing at a Democrat convention, they'd just be like, are you serious? Like, are you a conservative? Like, why are you saying that it's good to be a parent? And it's just completely unbelievable that the left has been so willing to just completely undermine every right that a child has and to completely force things upon them. Like, I think unborn children are children, and they should be treated as children, and they should have a right to life. The left doesn't think so, and that's one violation against the kids. And then, I mean, in like 30 years, I wouldn't be super shocked if we started having like infanticide debates, maybe even sooner than 30 years. But like the whole transgenderism thing too is like we haven't experimented enough on this to know how bad it is for someone. I mean, we obviously know that it's a completely terrible thing you can do to a child is to put them through transgender treatment, but we still haven't seen the complete repercussions of that. And I think it'll be something that will be viewed back on as being like as dangerous as like lobotomies. And it's something that in like, 50 years, society will hopefully say like, why do we even consider doing that? And I think that's going to happen because we see most nations are already banning it. The United States is actually kind of an outlier that we've taken so long to ban some of these things. And so I think we are going to see a future in which that's like kind of viewed as like a very medical, like, that where that's viewed as a medical tragedy. Uh, but yeah, so kids are very important and special to us, and it's just completely devastating to see how much they've been violated by the left's policies. And like the left is like, I mean, they're obviously trying to control the kids. They want the transgender stuff in the kids because if they rally kids to become transgender, to become a part of the LGBTQ movement, then that's like almost a guaranteed Democrat supporter. And then they want to, that's why you have things like drag queen story time, is like because they're trying to normalize the sort of ideology that they have put in place so that way when the kids grow older, they're more indoctrinated and they're more conformed to this like kind of nonsensical viewpoint of the world. That's and especially through education, we have completely it's completely ridiculous how much education is controlled by the left. I hope that I hope that completely changes course over the future, and I wish that the right was more engaged in terms of preventing that from happening. But we see how they're trying to infiltrate every single aspect of like a child's dignity, and they're completely robbing them of their innocence and completely robbing them of their ability to really like think beyond anything because they want to make sure that all the children think the way that they want them to think. And they're doing it because it's politically advantageous to them, but they're just not caring at all about the how sacred these members of society are to us. And so I think the reason why all three of my points were protecting kids, and protecting kids is because I see how much of the time the left tries to go after kids and how much they're trying to just completely undermine them of their innocence and of their dignity and of their rights. And if I think it needs to be stopped and something we should completely adamantly defend.
Children are the most precious, innocent, amazing amongst us for sure. And I'm just thankful that you fight for that so hard. Give us your closing statement, John Paul, your final words of wisdom, whatever you want to say to close us off.
So my final words of wisdom is that we cannot stop fighting for the things that we know are right. No matter how difficult it is for us to make society more pro-life, no matter how electorally disadvantageous it might be to have a pro-life candidate, it is a fight that is always worth fighting for. I don't care what the policy is. I don't care if we have an amendment that says abortion is okay in all 9 months. It is a fight that I will never give up. And it shouldn't be a fight that anyone should give up either. And once you know something is right, you should be able to stand for it as strongly as you can and defend it. Because if it truly is right, and if we're in a society that is truly wronging the most innocent people to us, then we should do everything we can to prevent that from happening and to stop it from happening. And so my words of wisdom are exactly that. Be be staunchly firm on your beliefs when you know something is right and when you know something is wrong and fight for it.
I love that, man. Never tell me the odds. Han Solo. I live by that. Odds don't matter. Doing the right thing is what matters. John Paul, thank you so much, man.
Thank you, Harrison.